Anyways, go ahead and pause this video and then resume it once you've signed up for a Deploy HQ account. All right, so once you've logged in to Deploy HQ, let's go ahead and set up a new project. Go ahead and give it a name. The name doesn't matter. I will say Fictional University. What does matter, what is important, is which service you choose here. Personally, in my case, I've uploaded my WordPress repository to the Bitbucket service, but you might be using a private GitHub repo. So wherever your repo is hosted, just click on the service and then click Create Project. Now at this point, Deploy HQ is going to ask your GitHub or Bitbucket account for permission to access it. So in my case, it redirected me to bitbucket.org with this Confirm Grant Access screen. You might see a GitHub related screen, but the idea is that we just want to grant Deploy HQ access to our Bitbucket or GitHub account. So I will click Yes, Grant Access. Cool, and now the Deploy HQ service is integrated with my Bitbucket account. So it will show me a list of any and all repos I have. At the moment, I just have the one. So click on the GitHub or Bitbucket repo that corresponds to this WordPress project. Okay, so now our Deploy HQ project has a repo associated with it. Now we just need to set up a server. So this is where we tell Deploy HQ how it can connect to our web host. So create new server, let's give it a name. The name doesn't matter, but I will just say SiteGround. Okay, down here we see protocol. So how do we technically want to connect to the web host? Well, I recommend never, ever, ever using FTP because it's super insecure. It sends over your username and password unencrypted. Instead, let's use SFTP or Secure FTP. In this context, it's sort of interchangeable with an SSH connection. So let's choose that option. Okay, then scroll down a bit. And these SSH configuration settings are going to be different depending on which web hosting company you're using. There's no magical answer I can give that will work in every situation, so you might need to check out your web host's documentation or frequently asked questions, or even reach out to customer support. But if you're using SiteGround, I can give you the exact answers. So for host name, let's say ftp dot, and then just whatever your SiteGround domain is. So for me, that's brads.sgedu.site. So ftp.brads.sgedu.site. Okay, so just replace that with your account name here. Next, for the port option, we do not want to use the default of 22. On SiteGround, we want to use 18765. Next up is the username. In order to figure out what you should use for your username, just log into your SiteGround cPanel, and within this main section, scroll down until you find the Files area, and then click on the FTP Accounts option. Okay, down here we can see our username. So it's probably just your first name and then your last initial and then some random numbers. So go ahead and copy that and use that for your Deploy HQ username. Now instead of entering a password here, let's instead click this checkbox that says use SSH key rather than password. Once we do that, then Deploy HQ will give us this SSH key. So just make sure that you select this entire text box, copy it into your clipboard. And now we just need to go into our web hosting cPanel and tell our web host that it can trust this SSH key. Or in other words, that it can trust Deploy HQ. So this way Deploy HQ can actually upload files to our web host. So back in our cPanel, let's go to the cPanel home. And from this main cPanel, if you scroll down all the way to the bottom, there's an advanced section with an option named SSH Shell Access. So go ahead and click on that. And down here we see a Upload SSH key area. So within this main public key field, go ahead and paste in your clipboard. And then let's click Upload. Your key was added successfully. Cool. So now back in Deploy HQ, We can scroll down because we've successfully added this to our web host. The next thing we need to focus on is this field named deploy path. Now this is going to be slightly different for every web hosting company, so you might need to do a bit of research, but on SiteGround and many other hosts, you're just going to want to place public_HTML/. That will ensure that your files get uploaded into the right directory. Okay, then we can scroll down. The next thing we want to focus on is this branch to deploy from. In my example, I only have the one branch, the master branch, but in the real world, it's common to have a dev branch, a staging branch, a live or production branch, and this way you can have different branches deploy to different servers. So you could have a staging branch deployed to a server that only you and the client know about, but the general public doesn't. You could have a dev branch that's just for you as the developer to push to and doesn't actually upload anywhere. And then your production branch could actually upload or deploy to your main web hosting account. Okay, so you can get creative with branches, but for now we just have our master branch. Next, let's focus on this subdirectory to deploy from. This just depends on how you set up your folder structure in your Git repo. Basically, you want to point towards the folder that contains all of the main WordPress files. So in my case, I have my fictional university folder, but it doesn't directly contain my WordPress files. Instead, I want to go into my app folder because that's where all of the main WordPress files and folders live. I want this to be the root of my public website. So back in Deploy HQ, for a subdirectory, I will just say go inside the app folder. Okay, then we can scroll down and click Create Server. Now at this point, we are ready to make our first deployment. So I will click Deployments here, and then let's click New Deployment. We want to actually send over our files to the web host. Let's send out this first deployment manually, because remember, at this point, our web host is completely empty. It doesn't contain any files, and it's showing this error. So first, let's just send out this manual deployment to send over all of our files, our hundreds or even thousands of files. And then after that, we can enable automatic deployments so that anytime your GitHub or Bitbucket master branch is updated, a deployment will automatically occur. So for now, let's set this one up manually. We can just scroll down. All of the default options look okay, so we can click Deploy. Cool, we see your deployment has completed successfully. So now if I go back to my SiteGround domain and refresh, whoops, I see a database connection error. I think I know exactly what's wrong here. You'll probably get this same error. So to fix this, we want to go into cPanel. Let's scroll down to the databases section and click on the MySQL databases. And down at the bottom, we just want to be sure to add our specific user to the specific database that we are working with. So click add that user to the database. The core of WordPress only needs 3 or 4 of these privileges, but in order to work with all of the plugins under the sun, I'm just going to grant all privileges. Click make changes. Okay, and now if we go back to our SiteGround site and refresh, cool, we can successfully connect to the database. And now that we've made that first one-time big deployment of all of our files, now let's set up automatic deployments so that anytime we update the master branch on our GitHub or Bitbucket account, a deployment automatically occurs and only uploads the changed files to our web host. So to set that up, back in Deploy HQ, within our project, let's click on Servers in the sidebar. Right now, we've just got the one server set up, so click the little pencil icon to make an edit or change. And then if we scroll all the way down to the bottom, we see Enable Auto Deployments. It's actually already enabled, so all we need to do is take this URL that it gives us here. So copy this into your clipboard. This is a webhook, and we just need to include this within our GitHub or Bitbucket settings screen. So back within my Bitbucket repo, or if you're using GitHub, go to the settings screen for your repo. Okay, settings. And then we are looking for an option named webhooks. So we want to add a webhook. The title does not matter. I will just say deploy HQ. What does matter is the URL. So that's where we want to paste in our clipboard. Okay, and then we can click save. And now, anytime we update this Bitbucket or GitHub repo, that's going to automatically trigger a deployment over in Deploy HQ. So just as an example, let's give ourselves a goal. I'm going to jump back to my local dev environment website, and let's imagine I want to make 2 changes. Maybe I want to change this headline to read Hello World instead of just hello. And maybe up in my header navigation, instead of campuses, I want to say locations. So we know exactly what to do. We just jump into our text editor, and within our theme folder, let's start with that headline change. So I will jump into front-page.php and change the headline to read Hello World. Save that. And then if I wanted to change a link up here in the header, I will just jump into header.php. Here's the navigation, scroll down a bit. Here's the word campuses. Maybe I want to change that to say locations. Give that a save. Now, at the moment, that's only going to update my local dev environment. So now let's imagine I'm happy with these changes. I've had a chance to test them out, make sure they look good. And now I want to go live with these changes. Now, thanks to our new workflow, watch how easy it is to update our live website up on our web host. All we need to do is commit and push our changes up to GitHub or Bitbucket. So in my case, I use the command line to work with Git. So I will add all of my changes. Run a git status just for good measure. Yep, those are the 2 changes I had in mind. Front page and header.php. So I will commit those changes. Updated homepage and header nav. And then just push that up to my GitHub or Bitbucket. And that's it. I literally do not need to do anything else. So right now in the background, Deploy HQ is doing its thing. We only needed to set it up that one time, that little bit of configuration, and now we don't ever need to deal with it, look at it, or touch it again. So I can just jump back to my browser and switch to the tab with my live website, right? brads.sgedu. And if I refresh, those changes are in place. Perfect. Deploy HQ only uploaded those 2 new files that actually changed. Now I know this might not seem like a big deal, but to me and so many other developers, this is such a luxurious workflow. Now you don't need to mentally keep track of which files you've changed. Because if you're developing a fairly big new feature, you might have changed 7 or 8 or 12 different files. And it can be hard to keep track of which files changed and which files didn't change. And normally you would have to manually upload all of your changed files. So we don't have to mess with any of that anymore. And we don't ever need to manually open up an FTP program ever again. And just in case you're curious, you can always jump over to Deploy HQ, click on Deployments in the sidebar, and here you can see a history of your most recent deployment. So there we see the commit message from our repo, updated homepage and header nav. You can even click View to see the details. Every deployment service is different, but with Deploy HQ, you can click on the transferring icon, and it will show you exactly the files that got updated, and we can see that we are in business. And that's actually going to bring this section of the course to a close. Now, on a related note, you might have a few questions about exactly which files you should keep within your repository. So, for example, if I look at my file tree and dig into my app folder, there's no right or wrong way of setting up a WordPress repository, but a lot of people like to ignore the WP Content Uploads folder. So that way, if you're just experimenting and uploading different JPEGs within your local dev copy, those files will not get automatically pushed to your web host. It's just personal preference. Other developers like to take it a step further and only have their theme folder within version control. There is no right or wrong way of doing this, but depending on how you set things up, it will affect how you handle WordPress core updates. I will touch on that topic in greater detail in the extra credit section of this course. But for now, that's going to bring this lesson to a close, so let's keep things rolling, and I will see you in the next lesson.